choose
Yeah,
their
so you're
own.
telling me that Southeast Asians have some particular moral failing that forced them, or that enabled them, or allowed them, or I don't want to say forced, some moral failing that drove them to go some other way. And that just sounds like racism.
Well, in your mind, it could appear that way. But what I'm saying is people like I can choose to reject you as a friend, or I can choose to embrace you as a friend. It doesn't make me morally defective because I choose not to be your friend. Let's say the genetic species of the Southeast Asians at some time in history.
Now we're not doing that. Affordable pest management, how's it going?
Oh, not bad. How you?
I'm doing all right. How old do you think the Earth is?
I'm assuming around 6,000 years.
Okay, and why so?
Well, because when I look at biblical genealogy, which I use as the platform for time and history, uh, it's roughly 6,000.
Sure. What do you make of the the claim that we have evidence of far older things all around us?
Well, I'm not talking about the Earth matter itself. I'm talking about humanity's existence.
So, to be clear, the live stream is about the Earth. And I asked you how old do you think the Earth is, and you said about 6,000 years.
Well, the Earth is like ageless. You know what I mean? It's matter. We don't know
Uh-huh.
how long matter existed, ever started. You know, none of us were there. You know, we can only assume. It's a hypothesis.
Is it the kind of hypothesis that we can test scientifically?
Potentially, I don't know how accurate it would be entirely, but the bottom line is matter. Until the Bang Theory took place and it actually formed something. uh we don't know how long that matter existed.
Well, I mean, look, surely we can agree that that matter is older than 6,000 years.
Well, absolutely.
Okay.
But we don't know when it formed. You know what I mean? That matter actually conglomerated into a planet. You know what I mean?
Well,
We just
we know pretty well. It's like four and a
All
half
right.
billion
Well,
years ago or so.
all right. So what? What does that have to do with anything?
Well, I
You're
mean,
saying the church lied about science, so I'm not getting that.
yeah. So maybe your church didn't, and good for your church. There are churches that say that the universe is 6,000 years old, and that includes the Earth.
Well, that's real stupid.
I agree. Are we in violent agreement here?
Well, I just have a real problem with broad assumptions, being painted with a broad brush against God. It seems to be insinuating against God, because it's the church and the whole atheism thing. And I just really have a hard time with it because, to be perfectly honest with you, if we're going to be completely fair with one another, there's no universal truth for or against God. Either way, on either side of the argument, we can't universally agree or disagree 100% on either side of the aisle. So I think we should just stay, within our walls, of what we personally agree with. Um, because I believe both sides paints with too broad of a brush.
I'm not really understanding what you're getting at here. If the claim is merely that we should let people believe the universe is 6,000 years old because that's what their church tells them, and then we should let other people believe that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old because that's where the scientific evidence leads, and you're saying that we should just let bygones be bygones, and everybody should be able to believe whatever they want. I mean, that's true, but I don't think that it's responsible to teach true thing, or to teach false things rather. So and I would imagine you would think the same.
I do. As long as we're not painting the Christians as, with a broad brush as just being psychos. I do believe there's certain sects of people, that don't know their ass from a hole in the ground. I would
Hmm.
agree with you. And, religion as a whole doesn't know what the hell they're doing. They're delusional.
And
And
to be
it's sad.
clear, you said that you think that the first humans came around 6,000 years ago?
That would be my best guess, based on the genealogical side of how the Bible portrays it. Uh, but again, it's a guess. I don't think it's all that important to me, one way or another, if it was 1,000 years more or 1,000 years less. I mean,
What do you make of human remains that are hundreds of thousands of years old?
I don't know. That's a dark area. If it's true in our carbon dating and we're able to do that, I'm not 100% confident. I wouldn't stake my life or bet my farm on whether or not it's 100% accurate, but I'm just saying humanity, as far as we know, going back to genealogical side of Adam and Eve forward, it goes to about 6,000 years. Now, what happened prior to that? Um, with dinosaurs, which empirically is true. I mean, it's there and predates man. If there were some evolution involved with that with humans, I don't know that. I'm not surprised by it. I don't, I'm not going to negate it, but it really has nothing to do with me just because I'm more focused in on from Adam and Eve forward,
But
uh,
why do you
in
think
the
that Adam and
biblical
Eve
story,
existed at all?
because I believe the Bible to be true. I had to make a decision on that. And once I made the decision, I've got to be both feet in. I can't be double minded because a double minded person is unstable. So I'm not going to waver on it unless there is factual, hard factual evidence against it. And I find none in the scientific world that would disprove it.
Well, so Adam and Eve were supposed to be the first people, right?
Correct.
But we have evidence, factual evidence, of people existing before 6,000 years ago.
Agreed.
So they
Uh,
can't be the first people,
well,
right?
as far as we know there were dinosaurs that predated.
Right,
Okay,
I'm talking
so
about people, though.
right, but what I'm saying is because there were dinosaurs, there was life.
Hmm.
What was in that world of life, if it was more even subhuman, I don't know. I wasn't a part of that game. I'm not going to deny it because I'm not a science denier. That's stupid. But what I'm saying is where my focus is what is spoken of in the Bible as far as from Adam and Eve forward. That's my focus. Science, that's fine. I mean, if you want to play in that sandbox, great. I have no problem with it. And I'm not going to begrudge you or deny you or say anything mean about it. I'm just saying it has nothing to do with me. I really don't care one way or the other if there were dinosaurs or subhuman type beings.
Well, no, but we know that
That,
there were humans, like humans like you and me humans.
well, I don't know
We have
that
their
because
skulls. We know that their
right,
skulls, their brains are as big as ours were,
right.
or their
I'm not
brains were
denying
as big
that.
as
But
ours
what I'm
are.
saying is, were they more Neanderistic?
No, no, they had societies. We have towns that are older than 6,000 years old.
Okay, let's all say that's
We have
true.
writing that's older than 6,000 years old.
Let's say that's true. Again, I'm not going to begrudge you for your scientific investigations or thoughts. But again, where my primary as a human being right now on planet Earth, my focus is from Adam and Eve, Genesis 1:1 to Revelations. I'm concerned with that because that is where my eyes choose to be. I'm not of the mindset of wanting to understand science and that predated Adam and Eve. I have there's no empirical interest in that one way or the other, whether it's true or not true. It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't affect me
Okay.
one way or the other.
I mean, look, like that's fine. I like you don't have to care about what's true or not. I but you did say that you were science-minded, that you don't want to be a science denier. So it seems like that you are interested in figuring out what's like true based off of, factual evidence. But look, I totally respect that, like, there are things that you care about more, and if you want to adjust your beliefs accordingly, that's fine. I guess we don't really have a place to go besides that then, affordable pest management. Anything you want to say before I let you go?
Well, what happened pre 6,000 years is a little out of the scope. It's hard for me to grasp 6,000 years. I mean, even
Yeah,
2,000 years.
no, I agree.
Christ walked the earth. It's like, wow, that's a big deal. That was a long time ago. The Romans were around. It was more barbaric. It was crazy. And then you go back another 2,000 years to the patriarchal time, and it's like, wow, that's crazy. That was a long time. The human mind, unless you're really adept into deep rooted thinking, I think 6,000 years is enough. And I think what we got to focus in on is whether or not, bottom line, there is spirit matter. And if spirit matter exists, then there's a potentiality that the Bible is accurate. It may not be fallible, it may not be without flaws because we're dealing with human beings over thousands of years. But is there enough evidence in the Bible to support some logical explanation for creation, mankind, and the purpose of our living in this day and age, and what may happen in the hereafter? That's the big question for me, because when all is said and done, when I breathe my last breath, it's not going to matter what happened pre 6,000 years. It matters whether or not Christ was a literal person who literally came from above and died for my sins, that made a path for me to be able to have everlasting life.
Right, I
That's
understand that, but if we're calling into question the truth of the book that you're relying on so heavily, if even its very first sentence is wrong, then shouldn't that mean that we should be at least somewhat worried that the rest of it might not be nearly as reliable?
Agreed, if it's wrong. But what I think most people don't take into account when they're reading the Bible, as with most things, people are impulsive. They want to privately interpret things. They don't want to dig and study. And I found most of the Bible can be rationally explained by understanding the original languages it was written in.
What do you make
Figures
of
speech.
what do you make of Genesis 1, where it describes plants existing before the sun existed?
Well, I agree with you wholeheartedly on every single point you will bring up about apparent Bible contradictions, as
No,
well.
that's just like factually wrong, right? So like, why should we trust the book to begin with?
Well, here's the thing: because science can't rationally prove factually abiogenesis, it doesn't mean I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I don't throw
There,
everything out
to be
because
clear,
you
there's
got
a
God and the
distinction
cat.
between abiogenesis and the claims made in Genesis 1. So abiogenesis is a hypothesis that has evidence for it, but perhaps not definitive evidence. It hasn't been ruled out. In fact, most scientists agree that it's probably what happened. We just haven't demonstrated it in a lab in the order required yet. On the other hand, the claims made in Genesis 1 are not only is there no evidence for them, they explicitly get the facts wrong. Right? It's not just that like this is an idea and we're not sure if it's right or wrong. This is an idea that we know for certain is wrong in Genesis 1. So it just seems like that this is a different category of things.
Well, I would agree that there are anomalies, what's called anomalies, but what I have found in my studies of the Bible, that when one understands the Bible and studies it in light of the original languages, the Oriental customs it was written in, as well as the figures of speech it was written in a different culture and time, those anomalies all come uh, and are rationally explained.
Can you
Some
explain what the
things
anomaly is that where in Genesis 1 it says that the plants were created on day 3 and the sun and the moon were created on day 4?
agreed. I don't
Can you
deny that.
explain
I'm
it?
not. I'm
Well,
no,
you said that these kinds of anomalies have rational explanations. So what's the rational explanation?
the rational explanation is that men wrote it over
Mm-hmm.
2,000. Okay, we have no original manuscripts. I think we would agree with
Yeah.
that.
So Genesis 1 was probably written around 2,500 years ago.
Correct. So, because we have no original manuscripts, we don't know if it was mistranslated, miswrote by man, which is fallible. It says
Mm-hmm.
in the book of Revelation that if any man add or take away from this, may all the plagues be added to him. Now, if that is true, what is said in Revelation, then it is possible that men who are fallible can add or take away or mistranslate the understanding. So what I'm not going to do is I look at the Bible in its totality. I look at it and I try to be rational, fair, and open minded about everything. And when I read it as a whole, I find more good than bad. I'm not saying there's not bad. I'm not saying that things aren't absolutely square and perfect. But what I am saying is me personally, when I read it, I find enough evidence in logical explanations for what is there as a whole than what is not there.
But couldn't you just say that that we don't have original manuscripts for any of the books in the Bible, any of them, not a
Correct.
single one? So why couldn't you just say, well, all of it could be in doubt? We shouldn't trust any of it because all of it could have been wrong. All of it could have been mistranslated or misquoted or whatever. In fact, maybe Jesus' name wasn't Jesus. Maybe it was Shmeezus. And we would never know, right? Maybe he wasn't crucified. Maybe they just meant that he liked the letter X. Like,
Absolutely.
so if the argument is that contradictions can be rationalized away by saying, oh, well, maybe this was a mistake, maybe it was mistranslated, then couldn't you just say the same thing about all of it and you shouldn't trust any of it?
No, that would be like saying because there's anomalies in science, you can't trust it.
No,
So
the point I'm making is that you have a book that has issues with it. It makes incorrect statements. And your justification for those incorrect statements is merely that, oh, well, we can't really rely on the current version of the Bible we have being the original. But if that's the case, then we can't rely on any of the current version of the Bible being the original because we don't have the original.
okay. So that would be like saying in the early days of studying science, the men and women who had good faith attempts at trying to understand what's going on made errors, clerical errors, or they made hard science, factual errors, and
Mm-hmm.
but later got clarified and cleared up as man grew in his understanding of science. So should we, at that point in the beginning, should we throw out the science, or should we say
No,
no?
no.
People made mistakes
There's a
and
symmetry
they
breaker
got
here.
clarified.
There's a symmetry breaker. The symmetry breaker is that we don't, we can throw out the science that the early scientists did because we don't need the early scientists in order to do more science because we can just go look at the natural world ourselves. We don't have to rely on old records or on old experiments. We could throw away all of the science that was done before the year 1980 and we could recover every single true thing that they came up with and we would not recover any of the false things that they came up with. However, because we don't have some kind of a primary source that we can go rely on for the biblical texts, we can't do the same thing with the biblical texts. All we have is the equivalent of the 1700s era scientists, and we can't go out and look at the equivalent of, the natural world. So the analogy fails because we just can't, we cannot self-correct once you're working with the Bible, but we can self-correct when you're working scientifically.
Well, I would disagree with you. I think we can self-correct when it comes to the Bible because there's a lot of facts and evidence that comes to light as we grow in our understanding of the Bible. Like I said, in understanding the Bible, in like for instance, my professor went to the Middle East and he studied what's called figures of speech. It's just ways of saying things that were said at a specific time that it is beyond our understanding today. So the West Coast to the East Coast has slang and ways of saying things that we don't quite understand unless you live there. So what I'm saying is a lot of misconceptions can be cleared up with that. And
But those misconceptions are in things that are potentially incorrectly translated.
potentially, yes. And I would agree with
we can never know if those incorrectly translated or misquoted or poorly written versions are accurately representing what the original was. We can never know that unless we go find an original manuscript, of course.
Well, what I had to do is come to the blanket bottom line conclusion as to whether or not there is this mysterious God. Okay. So that was the biggest question. It isn't the anomalies written in the Bible. It's bottom line is there a spirit energy that is of higher intelligence than us who made all of this? So that's the first and most important critical key in the puzzle. So what I did is I sought that first, and I came to the conclusion that reality has an identity. Okay, that at which something exists. Okay, for reality to exist at all, it must have an identity. Similar to Moses at the burning bush, whom
I don't know
shall
what
ye
that
say that
means.
I am?
What do
Who
you mean
shall I
by for
say?
reality to exist, it must have an identity?
Yeah.
I don't know
Remember
what that
when
means. Can you
God,
elaborate?
well, when God said to Moses, I am that I am. Okay,
I still don't know
that's
what you
the
mean. I don't
identity.
think that God exists. So you're going to have to put this in a perspective that makes sense to me.
Okay, so let's do that. Order demands, the order of the cosmos demands intelligent design. Okay.
Why?
In order to bring about order, like in my personal life, like if I had a garden or cleaning my house or anything, order demands an intelligent mindset. Okay.
Why
I
would
have
I
to
think that that's
purpose to
true?
have order. Pardon me.
Why would I think that that's true?
Well, if you let nature go, like if I let plant life grow around my house and just didn't
Mm-hmm.
weed and cut my grass and take care of my home, disorder would take over.
Not
Okay. There
always.
would be no order. So what I'm saying is I have to purpose in my life to have order. Therefore, order demands an intelligent mind behind it.
Look, so the fact that in order for your garden to be well groomed, you have to have intention, that does not therefore imply that any time there is something that looks structured, that there is intention behind it. You're going from, a sample size of 1, if you will, or perhaps a sample size of 1,000,000, to saying that this applies to everything in the universe. But I can just give you a counterexample. Look at crystals in a cave, for example, or pyrite crystals underground. These are things that look remarkably structured and remarkably orderly, and yet we know the natural process by which they arise. There's no intention behind them necessary.
Agreed. Now, what I'm going to do with you with these issues is meet you on the 50-yard line in fairness and in honesty, because neither side, like I said, can mutually come to a conclusion that there is or is not a God. So, but what I'm doing is I'm trying to structure some arguments that would point in the direction that there is higher intelligence beyond ourselves. Now, what you do with that, as Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6 says, that it is impossible to know God without faith. So one has to come to a 50-yard line of understanding and say, okay, I'm going to look at everything and then try to draw some form of a conclusion as to the possibility of there being a God. Then I have to stretch forth my faith, in which I did. Okay, because I had to come on God's terms. I don't study mathematics with an English book. I had to go to his book and say, okay, what is the criteria by which he will reveal himself to me? So I went to the book. I did what it said. I asked an honest question looking up into the heavens. Look, if you're there, if you're really there, I said, I honestly want to know you. And if you are there and you can prove it to me beyond any, reasonable doubt, then I will live according to what you're saying here.
Okay,
Okay.
so what's the proof beyond reasonable doubt?
Okay. To me, it's subjective. Okay. It happened to me. It ain't something I can duplicate for you. But what happened to me is
Hold on before you continue. So affordable.
Okay.
If your answer is you had an experience, I can 100% sympathize with that. I agree.
Okay.
Humans are susceptible to, changing our beliefs when we have certain experiences. Absolutely. I'm sure that if I had such an experience, I would change my beliefs. But when people start talking about their personal experiences, it's basically as interesting as when somebody starts telling you about their dreams. And so, like, it's enough for you to just say, yeah, I had a personal experience and it was compelling to me. And look, I'm willing to grant that. As long as you recognize that that's not a good reason for me to believe, then we can be in agreement.
Well, I think that you and I could come to a general consensus that hypothetically, if there is this mysterious God, okay, if he's there, let's just suppose he is.
Sure.
He has every right to set his sandbox up exactly the way he chooses to. Now, if he chooses to say, I am not going to reveal myself in this day and age the way I did in times past, 4,000 years ago, where it was tangibly present. But in this day and age, I am going to compel human beings to want to know me before I do. That's his prerogative. I mean, I think you would agree with me on that. Let not the thing created say to the
Then
creator,
I
why
wouldn't
did you
say
create?
he's all loving then.
Well, your version of love is different from the next person's version of love. Like how you raise your family might not be the
Well,
same
no,
as how
but
the
like,
next guy raises his family.
look, if he wants a relationship with all of us and he loves all of us, then
Mhm.
one would expect that he would meet the minimum criteria necessary for each individual person to be able to form a relationship with him.
He did.
No,
He did.
no,
What he did is
apparently not, because if he did, then everybody would have formed a relationship with him. Now, it may have been an antagonistic relationship. Maybe God revealed himself to some person, yesterday, and that person didn't like it, and so now they have an antagonistic relationship. But at least there's the possibility of a relationship that exists. If God does not meet the bare minimum criteria for each individual person, then it's just not clear at all why. It's not clear at all that God actually wants a relationship to begin with.
Well, not with everyone. Think of copulation, for instance. Billions of cells are dispersed in the womb, and one finds the egg and
So you
fertilizes it.
agree that God does not want a relationship with everybody?
No, I say that those who intend to want to know him, he does reveal himself. What
So
I'm saying
are you
is,
familiar with non-resistant non-believers?
yeah, and here's the thing.
So these would be examples of people that want to know and yet do not.
Let me ask you a question, sir. You're an individual, okay? You're a unique individual,
Mm-hmm.
and you have a lot of great qualities, but you set parameters up around you where you only let so many into your inner space, so many into your outer spaces, where you have casual relationships with people. Then you have real casual, hi and bye. And then you have intimate relationships with people. That is God's prerogative just as much as it's your prerogative. You don't let everyone into your personal
Look,
space. You don't let everyone into your home.
look, maybe you're just not picking up on the objection that I'm raising. If I
Okay.
wanted a relationship with, I don't know, the example I usually give is Scarlett Johansson. Let's say I wanted to be her friend, right?
Right.
She seems like a cool person, has a good sense of humor. Fine. I want to hang out with her. I think that she'd be cool to hang out with. Do I have any hope? Would it be reasonable at all for me to expect her to, at least consider my friendship if she doesn't even know I exist?
No.
Okay. Similarly, if, let's say 60% of the world's population doesn't even know that the Christian God exists, how could God reasonably hope for a relationship with those people?
That's an area that I choose to stay silent on because I don't know those answers. That's left for him. Here's what my theory is it's God's house. He can choose to allow those who he wants into his house, and then those that he doesn't, or that did not pursue a relationship with him, he would just take all of his attributes and move elsewhere and say, okay, you did not pursue a relationship with me,
But
so I will take my attributes and go here.
how could somebody pursue a relationship with him if they don't even know he exists?
You're 100% true, and I don't have an answer for that. I wish I
Like, this
did.
is a problem. Like, consider this. Does God just not like Southeast Asian people? Because if you go to Southeast Asia, like, almost nobody's Christian. And
Right.
it's just because Christianity spread in the Middle East and it spread in Europe and it spread through the Americas. It just didn't make its way to Southeast Asia, at least not until recently. And, you know, by then colonization and forced conversion wasn't really a thing anymore. So like, it seems like your God is just like, yeah, I just don't like Southeast Asians. It just seems like he's xenophobic or something. Like what's going on there?
No, I wouldn't say that. If you look at the genealogical breakdown as man progressed, you know, in the Bible, as you kind of read it, as it goes from Adam, Cain, Abel, you know,
With the
whole nine
exception of the
yards.
Philippines, by the way. The Philippines is very Catholic, I should say.
Right.
I'm talking about
what I'm
like
saying is,
Southeast
when you
Asia
look
on
at
land.
when
Go
you
ahead.
look at genealogically how man progressed and then geographically spread out, it goes from a point where Jacob and Esau divided off. Okay. And then you see that those people, you know, did not pursue the Abrahamic traditions and went in their own way. So they became more barbaric. You can see that in the types of nations that, you know, Israel went up against, warlike, barbaric type people. And so I think God distanced himself from them. It's similar to those
So
that
do you think that the people in Southeast Asia descend from people in the Middle East 6,000 years ago?
potentially, I don't know that
Okay,
for
but
sure.
I mean, it's strictly false, right?
Well, I know this is if they're further away from God or their ability to understand. It's
So like
maybe
God just likes
allowed
white
that.
people more?
Well, who knows? I don't know. You know, here's the thing.
I mean, look,
only know.
so you said that it's God's prerogative who he opens himself up to and who he doesn't. So it just
Correct.
seems like God just preferred like the whitish people and
I
just don't really like the people of Southeast Asia, really,
I
which
know
is
some
kind of like messed up.
that are highly Christian and very spiritual, and I know black people that are very spiritual. I don't want to put a lid on it. What I'm saying is that if if people aren't able or chosen or whatever, you know, I look at it, you know, I choose to stay silent on that because it's not my house. Who you invite to your party, sir,
Well,
is your business.
this seems like evidence that God isn't real, at least not an all-loving God.
Well, I respect your opinion, but what I'm saying
Okay.
is that
Can
I know
you
one
respond to the evidence?
life always comes from life. You don't get life from
I'm sorry, can you
non-life.
respond to the evidence that I brought up?
Yep, I just did.
Okay, so the evidence that I brought up is that God, if God were all loving, then we would expect God would love everybody equally. However, from the conversation we've just had, it seems evident to me that you don't think God loves Southeast Asians as much as God loves Europeans and the people that Europeans colonized.
Do you love everyone?
What's the issue?
Across the board? I mean, equally. I mean,
No, I'm not
honestly,
all loving.
well, see,
Is
God
God
is
all
all
loving?
loving, but it's not love. See, is it not
Does
love
God
to
want
send
a relationship with everybody?
Is it not love to send somebody to prison if they raped a woman? Is it love
Did
to say
Southeast Asians all grape
you
women?
need to go, you know, out of society because you're acting in
Did
an
Southeast Asians all grape women? Like, what are we doing here?
I don't know.
So what did the Southeast Asians do to deserve this lack of love from the creator of the universe?
Ask God. Ask God that.
Or maybe the God doesn't exist.
Well, maybe he doesn't. Maybe he does. But what I'm saying is,
I'm providing you evidence that he
we're
doesn't. At
hypothesizing
least not
he
the God that
does
you believe
live,
in.
if he does exist, what I'm saying is you'll have your day in court.
Or I won't. And you won't either.
Well, you know, you don't know that 100%.
Well, I know that your God doesn't exist because your God
you don't know that
your God embodies contradictions. One of the examples being the one that I just gave you.
Are you the arbiter of truth? Did somebody give you that gift or knowledge?
No, I'm just relying on things like there are no true contradictions.
So
do you think that there are true contradictions?
Is your hypothesis 100% provable? Yes or no?
Do you believe that there are true contradictions?
Your hypothesis 100%
do you believe that there are true contradictions? Your God, yeah.
Look, I've answered your questions. Can you just answer?
Yes, it is 100% proven that your God does not exist.
No, provable.
Yeah.
Factually,
so contradictions cannot be true. I just showed you a contradiction. Therefore, your God
Well,
cannot exist.
that is your opinion. Because
There's
it
nothing
appears like there's a
opinionated here.
contradiction,
If
it
your
doesn't
God
mean it's
loves
true,
everybody, then your God would
right?
reveal himself equally to all people. Your God does
So
not
it's
reveal himself equally to all people. Therefore, your God
so
is not all loving. However,
so
your God, by
God would have
definition,
to
is
fit
all loving, and so you have a true contradiction that your
so
God is not
God
all
would
loving
have to
and
fit
that your
in the
God is all loving.
parameters of your mindset in order for him to be real.
I'm sorry, I missed all of that because I was talking and I can't hear you when I'm talking.
So God would have to fit in the parameters of your personal mindset in order for you to believe he's real.
God would have to fit into the parameters that he is believed to fit into according to Christians. For the
Well,
Christian God to be real, yeah.
is there room for error?
I mean, Christians could be wrong that God is not all loving, but
There
then
you
it just
go.
wouldn't be the
So
Christian
your
God.
hypothesis could be wrong. So
So,
if you're basing it
to be
on
clear, I'm
Christians, then your
defining the Christian
hypothesis.
God to include one of the properties being all loving. If you don't
But
think the
is there
Christian God
room for error?
necessarily includes the property of all loving, then we're
Is
just not
there
talking about the
room
same
for
thing.
error in that
For
hypothesis?
error in what? I'm talking about the definition
In
of
your
what the Christian God
hypothesis.
is.
Well, wait a minute. Is there room for error in your perception of what you believe all loving is? And
No,
how God.
words just mean words,
Well,
right?
is there
Words
room
have
for
meaning.
error? Well, is there room for error? Yes or no?
Error in what? Words have certain meanings. We're applying the meaning of those
Exactly.
words.
Is there room for error in that?
Definitions aren't truth claims. Definitions can't be false or true. Definitions are just meanings.
Right. So is there room for error? In other words, is your
I don't know what that
perception
question means. Definitions can't be in error. Definitions are just agreed upon conventions for what words mean.
Is your perception capable of being
My
skewed
perception about what?
about God? And in these meanings, your word meanings you're talking about, and what other
No.
Christians are saying.
This is just what the words mean, right?
Well, could the words be miscalculated in some way? Maybe
It is
skewed.
so what is possible is that it is possible that the God that the God that you know, Paul believed in or whatever, it is possible
Right.
that the God that Paul believed in or that the God that Paul thought he believed in actually doesn't have the properties that Christians think he has. For example, it's possible that if that God exists, that it doesn't have the property of all loving, or it doesn't have the property of all knowing, or it doesn't have the property of being good. Those things are possible, but then you're just not talking about the Christian God. You're talking about something else entirely.
Well, let's just deal with spirit, a higher power. Is it possible there is a higher power, a spirit entity that is divinely inspired and created things? Yes or no?
No, I don't think so. But that's a separate conversation. That's not the thing that you believe in. You believe in the Christian God,
I
right?
believe in the Christian God.
Right.
But
and so that thing
there's
is not
anomalies.
possible.
But I'm not saying there's not anomalies that might have skewed your perception of him. And words
The
might not
anomalies being that he describes himself as all loving and wanting a relationship with everything, even though he doesn't.
How do you know that ain't skewed?
Oh, okay. So look, we could agree. So if that's skewed, then maybe you don't have a problem with divine hiddenness. But that means that the God that you believe in just isn't the God that you think he is. Which means that you are incorrect about the God that you believe in.
Yeah, well, I think we see in this world through glass dimly. And we're not given every single answer. And what I'm saying is there's enough there for me to base credible evidence that he does exist. Do I believe every single word? No, because it was written by man and it could have gotten skewed over thousands of years, but I don't believe the entire thing is wrong.
Look, there's a problem here, because if you believe that if it's true that the God you believe in, let me rephrase, if the God you believe in is the God that is all loving, is all powerful, wants a relationship with everyone, then that God isn't real, right? The example of divine hiddenness demonstrates that. Now, you might say that I believe in a supernatural thing, and I think it has these features, but I could be wrong about it having these features. That's a different thing, but then you're just not believing in the Christian God.
Well, that's everyone has a private interpretation. That and I believe that you're sincere in your belief, but sincerity is no guarantee for truth. You're very sincere about trying to disprove God. I don't judge you for that. But what I'm saying is you can't base that entirely on fact. You don't have enough evidence to support that.
The evidence is that the majority of Southeast Asia knows knows about Jesus and just doesn't think that he's God.
And
that's the
fine
evidence.
for
And that's true. I think that we can agree that that's true.
I think we can agree to disagree.
You think that that's not true?
Pardon me. I believe that Southeast Asians believe what they want, and they're going to be accountable for that. And I'm not. I'm not accountable for what the Southeast Asians do or don't do, or what they
I'm not
believe
asking you to be accountable. I'm saying that if it's the case that Southeast Asia is filled with people who don't believe in the God that you believe in, and these people are not particularly different from other people, meaning that they're not like more principally opposed to Jesus just from some intrinsic genetic factor, then that means that there is a reason God has not made himself as available to people in Southeast Asia as he has to people in the Middle East, North Africa, and Europe. And it seems like if that's the case, then your God is not all loving and does not want a relationship with everybody.
That's your perception. That is your belief.
Which part of the argument do you disagree with?
The all-loving.
You don't think that he's all-loving?
Because we send people to prison doesn't mean that society is not all-loving.
Do you think that society is all-loving?
For a reason.
Please tell me that that's not coming from your body.
Pardon me?
The sounds that I'm hearing?
I'm sorry.
Is that the sink?
Yeah, I've got to go to a doctor's appointment, so I'm trying to rush and do things. I'm multitasking, so I
Okay, no, you're good. To be clear, I don't think anybody would say that society is all loving.
Well, it doesn't mean like you're not loving for sending someone to jail or excluding them from society because they're antisocial or they have antisocial behavior.
Are Southeast Asian people antisocial?
I'm not saying they are or not.
Because they're clearly being excluded for something. So why are they being excluded?
I'm making no judgments against them. I'm just saying that's God's call. It's not my call. It's not your call.
Do you think that Southeast Asian people are intrinsically different in some way from, say, Europeans or North Africans or Middle Easterners? Do you think that there's some feature that Southeast Asian people have that those other groups do not have, or vice versa?
It's not my call. That's not my call because, who you invite to your party in your home is your personal private business.
That's true. However, if you said, I'm only going to invite white people to my party, and then you say, but I love all races equally, I would be a little bit suspect.
Well, true. But again, you're a private person and you might have a specific reason for that. Okay. And I'm not going to judge you for that.
The reason would be racism, by the way.
Potentially. But you got to know what's in one's heart before you make a judgment call against them. Just because something appears one way doesn't mean it's in one's heart. It's in one's heart that makes them bad or good. It's not so much what
so if somebody ran a corner store and they put up on their in their window, they said no Jews allowed, would you say that, oh well, we can't know if they hate Jews, we have to know what's in their heart, and we can't know that?
But that's not the same analogy though. I mean, God never put a sign up that said no South Asians allowed. He
may as well have, because he didn't reveal himself to them.
You don't know that.
So are you telling me that he did that it's possible he did reveal himself to them, and then they just didn't know? You don't know. We don't know that. I think we do know. Yeah, I did use the word suspect in the way I meant to use the word suspicious. That's true.
Let's be honest. You don't factually know that.
I don't know what that statement means. The point is that like it's the fact that unless you think there's kind of two options here, right? So either one, God did reveal himself to Southeast Asians equally in the same way that he revealed himself to Middle Easterners, and Southeast Asians just didn't receive it because Southeast Asians are like morally bankrupt or something, or God didn't reveal himself in the same way to Southeast Asians as he did to Middle Easterners. And so you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place here. Either A, you're saying that that Southeast Asians are just like, you know, morally bankrupt or something, or incapable of receiving the gospel for whatever reason, or B, God didn't choose to reveal himself to them, in which case God isn't interested in universal relationships.
We don't know what may
Those
or
are the
may
two
not.
options, right?
Yeah,
so it's
but
one or the other, and both don't look good.
What if he did thousands of years ago and they chose to go their own way and choose
Yeah,
their
so
own?
you're telling me that Southeast Asians have some particular moral failing that forced them, or that enabled them, or allowed them, or I don't want to say forced, some moral failing that drove them to go some other way. And that just sounds like racism.
Well, you know, in your mind, it could appear that way. But what I'm saying is people like, I can choose to reject you as a friend, or I can choose to embrace you as a friend. It doesn't make me morally defective because I choose not to be your friend. Let's say the genetic species of the Southeast Asians at some time in history.
No, we're not doing that. We're not doing that, sorry. Nope.